It's no secret that as video games have matured, so too have the tools used to create them. And those tools haven't just matured, they've become far more accessible than ever, to the point where if you really wanted to, you could go online and download a game engine right now and get started creating a game within minutes. Unreal, Unity, RPG Maker, Game Maker, just to name a few, these have paved the way for countless individuals to dive headfirst into contributing to their favorite hobby, learning skills they never even knew existed, and creating fantastic universes from their minds. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, because for every grand world that's created by a visionary are hundreds, if not thousands more that should never have seen the light of the internet. And normally, that's a very good thing. Success can't be found without stepping through a lot of failure, but the trick is to be able to recognize a failure and not to be blinded by your own bias. You've got to ask yourself, is the thing I made worth consuming? For Halloween, I decided it would be fun to explore the dregs of Steam and itch.io for some of this bias. Games that are, in most cases, so bad that someone should have taken the consideration to tell the creator that they're not very good. Granted, some of these are asset flips, but even asset flips may have a naive person behind them trying to create something good. By the way, there is a fundamental difference between publishing something on itch.io versus publishing something on Steam. Steam is, or at least used to be, a place for professional products. Hell, you've even got to pay to get on the platform. Itch.io, on the other hand, is free and is definitely a place of sharing for sharing's sake. A place where fledgling developers can throw their stuff out into the world and begin getting feedback. Or perhaps they're just looking for a place to host their creation for their friends. Either way, because of the difference of the nature of each platform, I'll make it clear where the game came from, and my judgment and critique will take that into account. I couldn't have a proper experience with horror games without a clown game in the mix now, could I? This one is simply called Clown House, and I found it for free on itch.io. A horror game you've never experienced before. Step inside the grotesque house of lunatic clowns. You're trapped in a darkened house with lunatic clowns due to a meaningless reason. You need to find the key to escape the house, hidden in a random spot. Some of the clowns are evil and they want to kill you. You don't know which. You have a pistol in your hand, use it to defend yourself. Keys, location, and innocence of clowns change each time you start a new game. Don't be fooled by this game's description or screenshots. There's far less substance to it than you would initially expect. There's a grand total of about 4 rooms in this house, and as far as I could tell, the key has a single designated spot where it can spawn in each of the rooms. It's not even hidden either. It's just right there, on a table, in plain view, ready for you to nab. I'll admit this game was a little bit creepy for the first minute or so, until I discovered exactly how small the house was, how unthreatening the clowns were, and how incredibly shallow the whole experience ended up being. Once you know what to do, you can often finish the game in less than 15 seconds. I lasted about 5.5 minutes exploring the house and beating it a few times before I just had to move on to something else. It's a relatively inoffensive game for what it is, but what's bizarre about it is the review section on the game's itch.io page. It's weird how positive some of these, some of these reviews are. Look at this. I liked this game. It was weirdly fun. Like, it is totally something I will play with my friends if I was bored. How? I don't get it. So good because it's an itch.io game. I would rate it 7 out of 10, but because of how short it is, I would rate it 6 out of 10. Make more and make it longer. And then of course we have a YouTube video with a guy with his eyes way too big, making a ridiculous face, 4 slightly spooky games, and he picks a clown from the movie It. I got murdered and then I didn't get the murdered. Nice little spooky game. I think the ending frame should stay a little longer instead of just immediately refreshing the game. Almost didn't realize I'd beaten it. This game is too scary for me? Scared the absolute pants off me. I beat it the first time but missed the text that appeared when you beat it. I don't know about all that. Maybe I'm just too old and too unafraid of clowns for this game? Or maybe I'm just offended that clowns are always the target of unjustified fear and violence. Remember, you too can stop unjustified violence against innocent clowns everywhere. Join our campaign, #ClownsAreInnocent, to show your support for the cause. The next 4 games I got in a bundle on Steam for $2 or $3. Yes, I actually paid real dollars for these games, something I advise all of you to avoid for your own sake. All of these games were put on Steam in the past 6 months by a publisher called Cheesecake, under 3 different developer names: Pudding, Bunny, and Caffeine. When you click on one of the developers' names to go to their individual page, they all end up going to the same page, Cheesecake Dev, which makes it seem like we have a good old-fashioned asset flipper on our hands. Each of these games is a slightly different flavor of an escape room puzzle, with various levels of jank applied to each one. They're not fun, they're not well made, and they're not really worth anyone's time, but I'm gonna talk about them anyway. Bunny, the horror game, is the first of the bundle that I played, and as I started playing it, I was convinced that this would be the worst of the bunch. You wake up in a terrible house, and there's nothing familiar about you. There's only a murdered rabbit inside. Every place in the house is trapped, and the aim is to catch you. There is a terrible bunny in the house. You must open the main door, which is locked by escaping from the rabbit and escaping from its traps. But it is not easy. Use all the clues in the house to solve all the puzzles. The bunny wants to catch you. You must be careful. Most hear the voice. You have 7 days. By solving various clues, open locked boxes and doors, finally open the main door, and run away from the terrible house. You can hide some cupboards, under the bed, in the tub. You can disable the bunny using the carrot arrow or bat or knife. Be careful when you trap it in the place. Bunny is a very scary horror game. As the description would suggest, you start out in a nasty-looking attic with some strangely glossy wall textures, and everything looks both way too sharp and way too blurry at the same time. What this game expects you to do is roam around the house and find items to combine into other things, I guess, all while trying to avoid the bunny that's chasing after you. Nothing's clear, though. You can find things to carry around, but what they're actually used for is anyone's guess. I wasn't able to find a use for anything that I found before I got fed up with the game and gave up, but I gave it nearly 20 minutes. Every game in this collection has some visual gimmicks that made me laugh for one reason or another, though. I already mentioned one in this game's abnormal blurriness, but there's also something really weird about the door opening animation. It opens and closes way too fast and makes the most underwhelming door sounds I've heard in a long time. Maybe it was my exasperation with this game and its floating graffiti having built up into delirium by this point, but these doors were probably the best part of this game for me. The Momo game is the game that I found first in this bunch. I was attracted to how ridiculous the visual of the monster was and thought it would be a good and terrible time on stream. What I didn't know at the time, though, was what Momo actually is.
This is kind of creepy, but have you been following this viral Momo challenge? It's a threat to children.
Momo finally killed someone.
The Momo challenge passes itself off as a game, but it is certainly not that.
Children will accept a friend request via an unknown number on WhatsApp.
They're given a series of tasks to finally meet the Momo, and those tasks start off small, but then escalate quickly.
Momo now demands that you do crazy shit like commit suicide.
The game then threatens the player if they refuse to follow the game's orders.
Apparently, Momo is some screwed up game that young teens have been playing over social media that's been scaring kids and parents, and I never knew about it. But what that means is that this game seems to be an attempt at cashing in on this aspect of pop culture in a way that is, dare I say, clever? If you're an asset flipper looking to make easy money, that is. What's surprising, though, is that this game seems to be the most competently put together of this bunch. The goals seem relatively clear, and they're actually communicated to you in the game. After calling Momo, you need to run outside and turn on the generator, and once that's on, you need to find and turn off all the noisy things in the house, all while avoiding Momo. I'm not sure what happens after that, because I was only able to turn off about 4 out of the 5 hidden objects in the house, and could never figure out what the final thing was before getting caught over and over and over again. After 13 minutes, I gave up. The game itself thinks that the moral of the story is not call Momo, but I think it should probably say not play Momo instead.
Got him!
Even though it's not competently put together at all, Daddy is by far my favorite game of this particular bundle, and it made me laugh the most. It also happens to be the only one I was able to finish in spite of how bad it is, taking me 25 total minutes of playtime. Before I get too much further into this game though, I want to warn anyone who's easily motion sick to look away until we get to the next game, because this game's head bob is just...
You mean astounding? Yeah, you do.
Daddy is a survival horror game. You have to find your daddy. On your way with your dad, something is happening to her daddy and he is kidnapped by another man. You're going home after the guy. You're trying to save your father, finding all the clues. By opening the right doors and then rescuing your daddy, you have to escape from home together. Your daddy is being held somewhere in the big house. But be careful, someone thinks you are a daddy. What? But be careful, someone thinks you are a daddy. You can hide in cabinets, chests, and a barrel. If you can find the gun, you can protect yourself. Solve all the clues in the house and escape it. You have to do all this before you get caught. I don't know what these developers think kidnapping looks like, because the game's introduction is, well, take a look. Daddy? He's barefoot. Why is he barefoot? Where are you going, Daddy? Daddy... Wait. Daddy... No, Daddy! An exploding giant dwarf just killed you! That's a hell of a kidnapping. It's a wonder either of them survived. Anyway, you wake up in a room by yourself, free to take in the glory of the busted lighting as it pours through the seams of the ceiling above you, and you've got to work your way through this house to find your daddy. You play the role of a gigantic baby with an eating disorder and must use axes, guns, and keys to defend yourself from the drunk exploding dwarf man that stole your daddy. If you don't eat enough, you get hungry and your vision starts to distort. And you've got to eat a lot, and you've got to eat often. And if the drunk man catches you, you're returned to the room you started in, free to continue to explore without consequence. Honestly, that's the only reason I was able to finish this game at all, because there is absolutely no consequence for failing, unless you want to count this one time where the game's rendering just completely failed when I respawned, forcing me to restart the game. The reason this game made me laugh so much has to do with the drunk man though. His walking animation is ridiculous. He'll toggle a door before walking through it, even if that toggle happens to close the door in front of him, and he'll trip over this cord on the floor every time you lure him into it. The gun you find has less power than a broken water gun, and finally, the dance party. What? What? I think this game broke me. Did I say Daddy broke me? Because I think it's the final game of this bunch, Grandpa, that truly broke me. I couldn't even get through the description without feeling defeated. Grandpa is a survival horror game. In the game, you are controlling a man who was kidnapped by an old man. You have to escape from the house by solving the puzzles in the game with the first-person perspective. There are a lot of puzzles in there, and they all interact with each other. Open the closed doors, you must escape the traps. Grandpa caught you and locked you in your home. You have to escape from the house. You have to solve the puzzles inside the house. If you are so scared, you will have to close your eyes. When you calm down, the character will open his eyes. He hears everything. If you find syringes, stick it in the grandpa and neutralize it. Certainly, the effect will pass after a while. You can hide in wardrobes or desk. If you drop something, he hears it and comes running. I couldn't tell you much about this game other than what came out of that description because I only played it for about 6 minutes and barely made any progress. I did have a small amount of laughter when this picture on the wall inexplicably fell as I approached to get a better look at it. Oh my god! And that mostly had to do with how ridiculous the idle animations for the characters' hands are. This game is easily the worst of the bunch. The mouse sensitivity makes no sense, the goals are somehow even more convoluted than the previous games, and it overall felt like an enormous chore to play. Apparently there's a game called Granny that this is trying to rip off? I don't even know. But what I do know is that this was probably the game I hated the most, not out of this bundle, but out of the whole set of games that I played in this video. This next game is called The Pit, and I found it for free on itch.io. This is technically speaking the objectively worst looking game in this video, but I think it's my favorite. Not because it's competently put together, because it's not, but because out of all the games that I played, this one somehow felt the most original and the most, impassioned? Obviously, the game looks terrible. The wall and floor textures are stretched beyond recognition, any models that are used are barely distinguishable as an object, the ceiling is made from what looked like a ground dirt texture, the doors are made of tree bark, and the game's main horror aesthetic is this weird-looking red mask. All you do in this game is explore the same-looking hallways and rooms for a lever to open the tree bark doors so you can move on, occasionally getting teleported into an alternate dimension for a few seconds. At some point, about 14 minutes in, I guess, I did the wrong thing somewhere and ended up back at the start of the game, and that's about where I stopped. Right there. But why is something so obviously bad my favorite game of this bunch? Well, partly because the bar is not very high to begin with, but it feels like this game was made by some kid who was just now dipping his toes into game development for the first time. I can't imagine any of these models are something that were grabbed off of an asset store. Everything looks like it was modeled by a kid with a limited amount of experience, and the design of the game feels the same. Like, it starts to get slightly more complex and ambitious as you get further in, as if he was starting to get a hang of the tools he was using and fell into a groove, and then even further in started to get lazy and cut corners. Well, that was my initial impression at least. After writing that, I decided to do some digging to make sure, and no, the creator of this game is an adult with a few projects under his belt. Still, like I said at the top of the video, failure is essential to success, and having made and finished products while learning how to make things is a lot more than most of us could probably say. Fading Visage cost me a little over $1 on Steam, and I can confidently say that it was a little over $1 too much. There's not much to this one. 0% of the 11 user reviews for this game are positive. Fading Visage is a mystical horror game where you are to explore gloomy locations and reveal a terrible secret. The abandoned house will be your shelter, however, you will have to go outside from time to time and search for clues that can shed light on a long-forgotten incident. The incident that you somehow are involved in. That's for sure. Otherwise, the mysterious spirit wouldn't call you so persistently and show you the way to the evidences hidden somewhere in these woods and marshes. Be careful, it's dangerous to go at night to the haunted forest. However, you have to be wary even in the daytime. And if the strange entities start to chase you, run for your life. At the end of the game, if you're lucky enough to make it through, it's not so easy to survive here. You'll find out what brought you to this creepy place. And the moment when you'll discover the truth will be as much horrible as all the events you'll witness before it. It's a narrative experience with some actual voice acting.
It was a very hot day. I remember regretting that I was wearing a pullover.
Questionable gameplay, and a boring aesthetic. The game goes in a loop of starting in the house, following a little fairy outside to some piece of evidence and some exposition, then running away from spirits to the safety of the house, blacking out, and doing it all over again with a new piece of evidence. If you get caught by a spirit, you have to start all over again. It's very, very boring. And it's not bad in a funny way, it's just bad. Purgatory is another free game from itch.io, and it's completely unremarkable. This game is just a static maze. You pick up a flashlight and have to find your way through to the end while avoiding a sliding bat tentacle creature that's chasing you around the maze. Half the walls aren't even connected to the floor, the flashlight lags behind your mouse movements a considerable amount, and once you find the end, it's easy enough to find it again and again. The exit is a weird glowy ball with gas coming out of it, by the way. Not sure about that choice. It seems like everything in here is unique, but the level of execution screams laziness more than it screams amateur. It was made for the bite-sized horror game jam, in which entrants had a full week to create a game from scratch that's completable in 10 minutes or less. A week isn't a very long time, but surely a day or two would be enough for something like this? Regardless, the game's innocent if boring, and it did rank 24th out of 32 in the contest. But I'm kind of curious about the games it beat now. Dusk of Confinement is actually the first game that I played during this night of terrible games, and it was honestly a really mellow entry point to this madness. That doesn't mean it was good, but it was playable enough, I guess, for a while. Listen to this description though. Dusk of Confinement, horror with a first-person view in which you can test your nerves for strength. Events take place in the mansion in which the serial maniac John Smith lives. In the role of the main character, Alvin Backer. You have to get out of the house full of mysteries, mystics, and the most intimate nightmares ever come to your head. Features the terrible atmosphere of the old house, excellent graphics of Unity 5, atmospheric sounds, mostly just you breathing really hard, and interesting puzzles. Yeah, the only thing that I think was true about that description is the terrible atmosphere because, ooh, boy, it's bad. I paid $1 for this crap. At least this game tries to incorporate puzzles into the mix. You start out in a random room in the house and you have to find a few playing cards around the area that have numbers on them. Each face card corresponds to a number, and you have to use the guide next to the safe to piece together how the code works. I'd commend the devs here for at least having some element of gameplay and a requirement to think at least a little bit to piece something together if the keypad worked properly. It took me a bit to figure out that this message at the bottom of the screen is supposed to say, use the keys on the keyboard, but the word keyboard is missing, so there's just confusion. And when you finally do figure it out, the game assaults you with a terrible screeching beep sound that scared me more than any game in this whole video did on its own. How do I even use the buttons though? Use numbers on the what? Ah! And did I mention that half the gameplay revolves around maintaining your flashlight's battery power? Seriously, this thing sucks batteries dry more quickly than a Sega Game Gear, and even though they're literally all over the house, every time you replace them, you're gonna hope that you didn't just use your last one. Or maybe you do hope that you just used your last one so you can finally end this torment. The best part of this game, though, is this creepy piano player who, well, just watch. Hey man, what the hell? What? I didn't end up playing for much longer after that because I soon stumbled across some very strangely placed bookshelves that confused me with their placement, and as I was inspecting them, I walked through a wall and fell into the endless sky. You know, just a normal Thursday. Well, that's about it for this adventure. I did play 2 more games on Itch.io though. Edwin Wants to Go to Cool Hell, which is more of a choose-your-own-adventure text-based game with some illustrations, and Unknown Utopia, which was weird and confusing. Reminded me of games like Pony Island, but less playable and less intuitive, and a lot more confusing. Neither of these games are really right for this video, but I figured I'd at least mention them since I also played them on the same night. Regardless of how bad all of these games were, though, this was an interesting experiment for me, and revisiting these games through writing this script was also weird. I'm used to covering better games, and in most cases, these games didn't even try. I might have been a bit mean in some places, but if you're a person who has wanted to try game development or is currently pursuing it and are afraid of failure, don't be. Failure is inevitable and important. Don't let videos like this stop you from pursuing something that you enjoy, just because someone like me might say something negative about it. But hey, critique's how you grow, right? And like I said, Itch.io is a place where you can share for the sake of sharing, and is a legitimately wonderful place for games like the ones in this video. And I did try to be much more lenient to the games I got for free from there as opposed to the ones that I paid real money for on Steam. But the sad thing is, if I hadn't mentioned it, would you have even been able to guess which is which? Thanks for watching. This is a bit of an experimental video format for me, so I'd appreciate it if you let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and if you did like the video, please be sure to hit that like button, it helps out a great deal. Or if you thought I was too mean to the developers, hit that dislike button, and subscribe if you want to see more of me in the future, and I'll see you next time.